fact, anything to have to do with the Flash, whether it's the DC version or whatever, don't do it. Okay? And with that, may I present the Mousetrap.
And according to Scotland Yard, the crime took place at 24 Culver Street, Paddington. The murdered woman was a Mrs. Maureen Lyne. In connection with the murder, the police are anxious to interview a man seen in the vicinity, wearing a dark overcoat, light scarf, and a soft felt hat. Motorists are warned against ice-bound roads. The heavy snow is expected to continue, and throughout the country there will be a certain freezing, particularly at points in the north and north-east coast of Scotland. In the southern half of England, expect heavy snow whipped into drifts up to 6 feet deep, in parts as far south as the Chiltern Hills. According to the Royal...
Mrs. Barlow! Mrs. Barlow! Mrs. Barlow! Quite cold. It really does look nice.
Molly! Molly! Where are you? Oh. Forgot all about this. Oh, there you are.
I was doing all the work, you brute.
Leave it all to me. Shall I soak the egg?
Done.
Oh, sweetheart, your nose is cold.
I've just come in.
Why? Where have you been? You've surely not been out in this weather.
I had to go to the town to get some stuff we'd forgotten. Did you get the chicken netting?
Well, it wasn't the right kind, so I went on to another dump. But that wasn't any good either. Practically a whole day wasted. The snow was coming down thick, and the car was skidding like anything. What do you bet we're not snowed up tomorrow?
Oh, I do hope not. If only the pipes don't freeze.
We'll have to keep the central heating well stoked up. Not too good right now. I hope they sent the coals along. We've not got any too much.
Oh, I do so want everything to go well at first. First impressions are so important.
Is everything ready? Nobody's arrived yet, I suppose.
Oh no, thank goodness. Everything's in order. Mrs. Barlow's hooked it early. Afraid of the weather, I suppose.
What a nuisance these daily women are. That leaves everything on your shoulder.
And yours. This is a partnership.
As long as you don't ask me to cook.
Oh, no, that's my department. Anyway, we've got lots of tins in case we are snowed up. Oh, Giles, do you think you'll be all right?
Got cold feet, have you? Are you sorry now that we didn't sell this place when your aunt left it to you, instead of having this mad idea of running it as a guest house?
No, I'm not. I love it. And talking of a guest house, just look at that.
Pretty good. What?
Don't you see? You've left out the S. Monkwell Manor instead of Monkswell Manor.
Good lord, so did I. However, it doesn't really matter, does it? Monkwell is just as good a name.
You're in disgrace. Go and stoke up the central heating.
Across that icy yard? No. Shall I bank it off for the night now?
No, you don't do that until 10 or 11 o'clock at night.
How appalling.
Hurry up, someone may arrive at any minute now.
Are all the rooms worked out?
Yes. Mrs. Boyle, front for post room. Major Metcalf, blue room. Miss Casewell, east room. Mr. Wren, oak room.
I wonder what all these people will be like. Oughtn't we to have got a rent in advance?
No, I don't think so.
We're rather mugs at this game, you know.
If they bring luggage. If they don't pay, we hang on to their luggage. It's quite simple.
But I can't help thinking that we ought to have gotten a correspondence course in hotel keeping. We are sure to get ahead in some ways. What if their luggages are just bricks wrapped up in newspaper? And where shall we be then?
They all wrote from very good addresses.
That's what servants with forged references do. Some of them may be criminals hiding from the police.
I don't care what they are, as long as they pay us 7 guineas every week.
You're such a wonderful woman of business, Molly.
And according to Scotland Yard, the crime took place at 24 Culver Street, Paddington. The murdered woman was a Mrs. Maureen Lyne. In connection with the murder, the police are anxious to interview a man seen in the vicinity, wearing a dark overcoat, light scarf, and a soft felt hat. Motorists are warned against ice-bound roads. The heavy snow is expected to continue, and throughout the country there will be a certain freezing, particularly at points in the north and north-east coast of Scotland. In the southern half of England, expect heavy snow with...
How do you do?
Thanks so much. My taxi gave up at your gate. He wouldn't attempt the drive because he had no sporting instinct. Are you Mrs. Ralston? How delightful. My name is Wren.
How do you do, Mr. Wren?
You know, you're not at all as I pictured you. I've been imagining you as a grim general's widow, that you'd be terrifically grim and mem-sahibish, and that this whole place would be simply crammed with Menard's brass. Instead, it's heavenly. Quite heavenly. Lovely proportions. That table is fake. Ah, but this one is still genuine. I'm going to like it here. Have you any wax flowers or birds of paradise?
I'm afraid not.
Pity. What about a sideboard? Purple, plummy, mahogany sideboard with great solid carved fruits on it.
Yes, we have, in the dining room.
In here? I must see it. My goodness, it's so purple, plummy, and amazing. I
So
never would
glad
have
you like
expected
it.
it to be just like this. Wow, wow, wow. Oh my goodness. Wow, it's perfect.
Do come and warm yourself.
Absolutely perfect. Real bedrock respectability. But why do away with the center dining table? Little tables just spoil the effect.
We thought guests would prefer them. This is my husband.
How do you do? Terrible weather, isn't it? Takes one back to Dickens and Scrooge and that irritating Tiny Tim. So bogus. You know, you're perfectly right about the tables, Mrs. Ralston. I'd been distracted by my feeling for period. If you had a center dining table, you'd have to have the right family round it. Stern, handsome father, with a beard, prolific, faded mother, 11 children of assorted ages, a grim governess, and somebody called Poor Harriet, the poor relation who acts as a general dog's body and is very grateful for being given a good home.
I'll take this up. Oakroom, did you say?
Yes.
I do hope that it's got a little four-poster with tiny chintz roses on it.
It hasn't.
I don't think your husband's going to like me. How long have you been married? Are you very much in love?
We've been married just a year. Perhaps you'd like to come up and see your room?
Ticked off. But I do like knowing all about people. I mean, I think people are so madly interesting. Don't you?
Well, I suppose some are and some are not.
No, I think everyone's interesting. Because you never know what anyone's really like or what they're thinking. For instance, you don't know what I'm thinking right now, do you?
Not in the least. Would you like a chocolate?
No thanks. You see, the only people who really know what others are like are portrait painters. They don't know why they know it, but it comes out on the canvas.
Are you a painter?
No, I'm an architect. My parents, baptized me Christopher Wren in the hopes that I'd become an architect. Christopher Wren, as good as halfway home. Well, actually, of course, they always used to laugh at me and make fun about St. Paul's. But who knows? I may yet have the last laugh. Chris Wren Prefab's nest may yet go down in history. I'm going to like it here, and I find your wife most sympathetic.
Indeed.
And very, really beautiful.
Oh, don't be absurd.
There. Isn't that like an English woman? European women take compliments as a matter of course, but English women have all their feminine spirit crushed out of them by their husbands. There's something very boorish about English husbands.
Do come up into your room.
Shall I?
Giles, can you soak up the hot water boiler?
This is Monkswell Manor, I presume.
Yes.
I'm Mrs. Boyle.
I'm Giles Ralston. Please come into the fire, Mrs. Boyle, and get warm. Awful weather, isn't it? Is this your only luggage?
Major Metcalf is seeing to it.
I'll leave the door for him.
The taxi wouldn't risk coming up the drive. Stopped at the gate. There was much difficulty in getting that. It seemed nothing was ordered to meet us there.
I'm so sorry, Mrs. Boyle. We didn't know what train you were coming by. You see, otherwise, of course, we would have seen that someone was standing by.
All trains should have been met.
Let me take your coat. Oh, my wife will be down in a minute. I'll just go along and give Metcalf a hand.
The drive might have been at least cleared of snow. Mousetrap handling casual, I must say.
I'm so sorry.
Mrs. Ralston,
Yes.
you're very young.
Young?
To be running an establishment of this kind, you can't have much experience.
Well, there has to be a beginning for everything, hasn't there?
I see. Quite inexperienced. An old house. I hope you haven't got any dry rot.
Certainly not.
A lot of people don't know they have dry rot until it's too late and they can't do anything about it.
The house is in perfect condition.
Could use a coat of paint. This oak has worm in it.
This way, Major. This is my wife, Molly.
Hello. How do you do? Absolute blizzard outside. Thought at one point we shouldn't make it. Oh, I do beg your pardon. If it keeps on like this, I should say we'll have 5 or 6 feet of snow by morning. Haven't seen anything like it since my leave in 1940.
I'll take this up. Rose room and blue room, did you say?
Oh, no, I put Mr. Wren in the rose room. He liked the 4 posters so much. So it's Mrs. Boyle in the oak room and Major Metcalf in the blue room.
Major?
Sir?
Do you have much servant difficulty here?
We have quite a good local woman who comes in from the village.
And what an indoor staff?
No indoor staff, just us.
Indeed, I understood this was the guest house in full running order.
We've only just started.
I would have said that a proper staff of servants was essential for opening this kind of establishment. I consider your advertisement most misleading. May I ask if I am the only guest with Major Metcalf at it?
Oh, no, there are several here.
And this weather, too. A blizzard, no less, all very unfortunate.
We couldn't very well foresee the weather.
The north wind doth blow, and it will bring snow. And what will the robin do then? Poor thing. I adore nursery rhymes, don't you? Always so tragic and macabre. That's why the children like them.
May I introduce Mr. Wren, Mrs. Boyle?
How do you do?
I'm going to like it here, won't you? It's so beautiful.
I have come to the point in my life where the amenities of an establishment are more important than its appearance. If I had not believed this was a running concern, I should have never come here.
There is no obligation for you to stay here, Mrs. Boyle, if you are not satisfied.
No, indeed, I shan't think of doing so.
If there has been any misapprehension, it would perhaps be better if you went elsewhere. I could ring up the taxi to return. The roads are not yet blocked. We have had so many applications recently that we shall be able to fill your place quite easily. In any cases, we are raising our terms next month.
You needn't think you can turn me out now. I haven't tried what this place is like. Mrs. Ralston, would you take me up to my bedroom?
Certainly, Mrs. Boyle. Darling, you're wonderful.
I think that's a perfectly horrible woman. I should like you to turn her out into the snow. Serve her right.
My pleasure. I've got to forego, I'm afraid. Lord, there's another one.
I'm afraid my car is bogged about a half mile down the road. Ran into a drift.
Let me take this. Any more stuff in the car?
No, I travel light. Not to see you've got a good fire.
Mr. Ran, Miss...
Hey, swell.
Yes, Miss Caswell. My wife will be down in a minute.
No hurry, no hurry. Gotta get myself thawed out. Looks as though you're going to be snowed up here. Weather forecast says heavy falls expected, moderate warned, etc. Hope you've got a lot of preventions in.
Yes, my wife's an excellent manager. In any cases, we can always eat our hands.
Before we start eating each other, eh?
Any news in the paper? Apart from the weather, of course.
Usual political crisis. Oh yes, and a rather juicy murder.
Murder? Ooh, I like murder.
They seem to think all the harm is still maniac. Strangled a woman near Paddington. Lunatic, I suppose.
Doesn't say much, does it? The police are anxious to interview a man seen in the vicinity wearing a dark overcoat, light scarf, and soft felt hat. Police messages to this effect have been broadcast throughout the day.
Useful description. Be pretty well anyone, wouldn't it?
When it says that the police are anxious to interview someone, is that a polite way of hinting that he's the murderer?
Could be.
Who was the woman that was murdered?
Mrs. Lyon. Mrs. Marine Lyon.
Young or old?
It doesn't say. Doesn't seem to have been a robbery.
I told you, lunatic.
Oh, this is my wife. Here's Miss Caswell.
How'd you do? Terrible weather, isn't it? Would you like to come up to your room? The water's hot if you'd like a bath.
You're right, I would.
I must hurry out to the kitchen and get on with things. Major Metcalf seems very nice. He won't be difficult. It's Mrs. Boyle who really worries me. We must have a nice dinner. I was thinking of opening 2 tins of minced beef and cereals, and opening a tin of peas and mashing the potatoes. Oh, and there's stewed figs and custard. Do you think that'll be all right?
I should think so. Not very original, perhaps.
Do let me help. I adore cooking. Why not an omelet? You've got eggs, haven't you?
Oh, yes, we have a lot of eggs. We keep a lot of fowls, and they don't lay as well as they should, but we've put down a lot of eggs.
And if you've got a bottle of cheap, any type wine, you could add it to the minced beef and cereals, did you say? Show me where the kitchen is and what you've got, and I dare say I shall have an inspiration.
Come on.
You brute wretch.
Isn't he sweet? He's put on an apron, he's getting all the things together. He says, leave it all to him and don't come back for half an hour. If the guests want to do the cooking themselves, it'll save a lot of trouble, won't it?
Why on earth did you give him the best room?
I told you he likes the 4-poster.
He liked the pretty 4-poster. Twerp.
Giles.
I've got no use for that kind. You didn't handle his suitcase. I did.
Had it got bricks in it?
Well, it was no weight at all. If you ask me, there was nothing inside it. He's probably one of those young men who goes around bilking hotel keepers.
I don't believe it. I like him. Seems very hard that all our guests should be either unpleasant or odd. Don't you think so?
Yes, terrible people, especially that Mrs. Boyle.
Indeed. I think Major Metcalf's all right, though, don't you?
Probably drinks.
Oh, do you think so?
No, I don't. I was feeling rather depressed recently. Anyway, we know the worst now. They've all arrived.
Who can that be?
Probably the Culver Street
Oh,
murderer.
don't.
1,000 pardons. I am Madame. Where am I?
This is Monkswell Manor Guest House.
But what stupendous good fortune! Madame! What an answer to prayer. A guest house and a charming hostess. My Rolls Royce, alas, had run into a snowdrift, blinding snow everywhere. I do not know where I am. I think to myself, I shall freeze to death. And then I take this little bag, I stagger through the snow, and I see before me big iron gates, a habitation. I'm saved. Twice I fall in the snow as I come up your drive, but at last I arrive, and immediately despair turns to joy. You can let me have a room, yes?
Oh, yes.
I'm afraid it's a rather small room.
Naturally. You have other guests.
We've only just opened this place as a guest house today, and so we're rather new at it.
Charming.
What about your luggage?
That is of no consequence. I've locked the car securely.
But wouldn't it be better to get it in?
No. I can assure you, on such a night as this, there will be no thieves abroad. And as for me, my wants are very simple. I have all I need here in this little bag. Yes, all that I need.
You'd better get thoroughly warm. I'll see about your room. I'm afraid it's a rather cold room because it faces north, but all the other ones are occupied.
You have many guests then?
Yes, there's a Miss Casewell and a Major Metcalf and a Mrs. Boyle and a young man called Christopher Wren. And now, you.
Yes, the unexpected guest. The guest you did not invite. The guest who just arrived from out of the storm. Sounds quite dramatic, does it not? Who am I? You do not know. Where do I come from? You do not know. Me? I am a woman of mystery. But now I tell you this. I complete the picture. From now on, there will be no more arrivals and no departures either. No butcher, no baker, no milkman, no postman, nobody and nothing but ourselves. That is admirable. Admirable. It could not suit me better. My name, by the way, is Madame Pavaccini.
Oh yes, ours is Ralston.
Mr. and Mrs. Ralston? And this is Monkswell Manor Guest House, you said? Good. Monkswell Manor Guest House. Perfect.
I consider it most dishonest you have told us that we're only just starting.
Well, everything's got to have a start, you know? Excellent breakfast this morning. Good coffee, scrambled eggs, homemade marmalade, all nicely served too. Little woman does it all herself.
Amateurs, there should be proper style.
Excellent lunch too,
Corned beef.
but very well disguised corned beef. Red wine in it. Mrs. Ralston promised to make us a pie tonight.
These radiators not really cooked. I shall speak about them.
The beds were also very comfortable. At least mine was. Hope yours was too.
It was adequate. Although I don't quite seem like the best bed, given to that very peculiar young man.
First come, first served. We got here ahead of us.
I would have said that place would be bigger and better writing bridge and other sorts of amenities.
Regular old tabby delight.
I beg your pardon.
Yes, I mean, I do see what you mean.
No, I shan't stay here long.
No, I don't suppose you shall.
That is a very peculiar young man. Unbalanced mentally. I shouldn't wonder.
I think he's escaped from a lunatic asylum.
Shouldn't at all.
Giles,
Yes,
can you come and shovel the snow again from the back door?
coming.
I'll give you a hand, what? Good exercise. Must have good exercise.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Really, what an incredible young woman carrying a carpet sweeper through the front hall. Aren't there any back stairs?
Oh, yes. Nice back stairs. Very convenient if there was a fire.
Well, then why not use them? I mean, all the housework should have been done in the morning before lunch.
I gather a host doesn't have to cook the lunch.
Very haphazard and amateurish, if you ask me. There should be a proper staff.
Not very easy to get nowadays, is it?
No, indeed. The lower classes have no idea of their responsibilities.
Poor old lower classes. Got the bit between their teeth, haven't they?
I gather you're a social.
Oh, I wouldn't say that. Not red, pale pink. But I don't take much interest in politics. I live abroad.
Those conditions are much easier abroad.
I don't have to cook and clean, as I gather most people have to do it in this country.
This country has gone sadly downhill. I sold my house last year. Everything was too difficult.
Hotels and guest houses are easier.
They certainly solved some of one's problems. Are you over in England for long?
Depends. I've got some business to see to. When it's done, I shall go back.
To Italy?
No.
France?
No.
I'm not on quite so loud. I find it distracting when I'm trying to write letters.
Do you?
If you wouldn't particularly mind having her on quite so loud.
But there's a writing table in there.
Understand?
Much warmer, I agree. Bloody old witch. Hello.
Wherever I go, that woman seems to hunt me down. And then she glares at me. Positively glares.
Turn that down a bit.
Is that all right?
Oh yes, it serves its purpose.
What purpose?
Tactics, boy.
Oh, you mean her?
She'd pinched best chair. I've got it now.
You drove her out. You drove her out. I'm glad. Let's think of things we can do to annoy her. I wish she would go away from here.
In this, not a hope.
But when the snow melts,
Oh, when the snow melts, a lot of things may have happened.
snow is such a beautiful thing, isn't it? So peaceful and pure. It makes one forget things.
It doesn't make me forget.
How fierce you sound.
I was thinking.
What sort of thinking?
Ice on a bedroom shelf, chilblains, raw and bleeding. One thin, ragged blanket, a child shivering with cold and fear.
My dear, it sounds too grim. What is it, a novel?
You didn't know I was a writer, did you?
Are you?
Sorry to disappoint you. Actually, I'm not.
Yes? Yes, this is Monkswell Manor Guest House. What? No, I'm afraid Mr. Ralston can't come to the telephone just now. This is Mrs. Ralston speaking. Who? The Berkshire Police? Oh, yes, Superintendent Hogman. I'm afraid that's impossible. He'd never get here. We're snowed up, completely snowed up. The roads are impassable, nothing can get through. Yes, very well. But what? Hello? Hello?
Molly, do you know where there's another spade?
Giles, the police have just rung up.
Trouble with the police, eh? Serving liquor without license?
They're sending out an inspector or a sergeant or something.
But he'll never get here.
That's what I told them, but they seemed quite confident that he would.
Nonsense. Even a jeep couldn't guess through today's weather. Anyway, what's it all about?
That's what I asked, but they wouldn't say. Just said that I was to impress on my husband to listen very carefully to what Sergeant Trotter, I think it was, had to say and to follow his instructions implicitly. Isn't it extraordinary?
But what on earth do you think we've done?
Do you think it's those nylons from Gibraltar?
I did remember to get those wireless license, didn't I?
Yes, it's in the kitchen dresser.
I'd rather a near shave with the car the other day, but that was entirely the other fellow's fault.
You must have done something.
Probably something to do with running this place. We may have ignored some kind of team pod regulation of some ministry or so. You practically can't avoid it nowadays.
Oh, I do wish we'd never started this place. We're going to be snowed up and everyone's cross, and we shall go through all our reserve of tins.
It's okay. Cheer up, darling. Everything's going all right at the moment. I've filled up all the coal scuttles. I've brought in the wood. I stoked the egg, and I did the hens. I'll go and do the boiler next and chop up some kindlings. But come to think of it, Molly, it must be something pretty serious to send the surgeon trickling out in all this weather. It must be something really urgent.
Ah, there you are, Mr. Ralston. Did you know the central heating in the library is practically stone cold?
I'm sorry, Mrs. Boyle. We're running.
I'm paying 7 guineas a week here, and I do not want to freeze.
Yes, I'll go and stoke it up.
Mrs. Ralston, you don't mind my saying, but it's a very peculiar young man you have staying here. His manners, his ties, never brush his hair.
He's an extremely brilliant young architect.
I beg your pardon?
Christopher Wren is an architect.
My dear young lady, I have naturally heard of Sir Christopher Wren. Of course he was an architect. He built St. Paul's.
Oh, no, I meant this Wren. His name is Christopher. His parents called him that in hopes that he'd become an architect. And he is. Or nearly one, so it turned out all right.
Sounds like a fishy story. What do you know of him?
Nothing more than I know about you, Mrs. Boyle, which is that you're both paying us 7 guineas a week here. That's all I need to know, isn't it? And all that concerns me. It doesn't matter to me whether I like my guests or whether I do not.
You are young, inexperienced, and should take advice from someone more knowledgeable than yourself. And what about this Carabicini?
What about her?
Well, she turned up out of the blue last night, and you didn't expect her.
To turn away a bona fide traveler is against the law, Mrs. Boyle. You should know that.
And why do you say that?
Weren't you a magistrate sitting on the bench, Mrs. Boyle?
All I say is that this Madame Carabicini, or whatever she called herself.
Ah, dear lady, speak of me and I shall appear.
I did not hear you.
I came in on a tit, like this. Nobody ever hears me if I do not want them to. I find that very amusing.
Indeed.
Now, there was a young man from...
Okay, I should really get on with writing my letters. I should woman.
My charming hostess looks upset. What is it, dear lady?
Everything's just rather difficult today because of the snow.
Yes, snow makes things difficult, does it not? Or else it makes them easy. Yes, very easy.
I don't know what you mean.
No, there's quite a lot you don't know. I think, for one thing, you don't know very much about running a guest house.
I dare say we don't, but we mean to make a go of it.
Bravo, bravo.
And I'm not such a very bad cook.
My dear, you're without a doubt an enchanting cook. May I give you a little word of warning, Mrs. Ralston? You mustn't be too trusting, you know. Have you any references with these guests of yours?
Is that usual? I always thought people just came.
It is advisable to know a little about the people who sleep under your roof. Take, for example, myself. I turn out saying that my car is overturned in a snowdrift. What do you know of me? Nothing at all. For all you know, I could be a thief, a robber, a madwoman, a fugitive from justice, and a murderer!
Oh!
You see, and perhaps you know just as little of your other guests.
Well, as far as Mrs. Boyle goes.
Miss Barty told to write letters in the drawing room. I shall write them in here.
Allow me to poke the fire for you.
Mrs. Ralston, I'm afraid the pipes of the downstairs cloakroom are frozen.
Oh dear, what an awful day. First the police and then the pirates.
Police, did you say?
Yes, they rang up just now. Say they're sending a sergeant out here. I don't believe he'll ever get here.
Don't say the price was... Oh, hello. Is anything the matter?
I hear the police are on their way here.
Oh.
Why?
That's all right. Nobody will get here today. Why? The snows must be 5 feet deep and all the roads are blanked up. Excuse me, madam.
Oh!
Thank you, sir. Detective Sergeant Trotter, Berkshire Police. Can I get these skis away and stow them somewhere?
Oh yes, go around that way. I'll meet you up in the front door.
Thank you, sir.
Why did you send for the police, Mrs. Ralston?
I didn't.
By the drawing room window, covered in snow and looking terribly hardy.
This is Detective Sergeant Trotter.
You can't be a sergeant, you're too young.
I may not be quite so young as I look, madam.
But terribly hardy.
We'll stow your skis away under the stairs.
Thank you, sir.
Mrs. Ralston, but may I use your telephone?
Oh, of course, Major Metcalf.
He's rugged, don't you think so? I always think that policemen are so very...
Hello? Hello? Mrs. Ralston, this telephone is dead. Quite dead.
It was all right about half an hour ago.
The line's gone with the weight of the snow, I suppose.
So we're quite cut off now. That's funny, isn't it?
I don't see anything to laugh at.
Private joke of my own. Hiss the sleuth has returned.
Now, can we get to business? Mr. Ralston? Mrs. Ralston?
If you want to see us alone, you can go out to the library.
No, it will save time if everyone's present. If I might sit at this table?
I beg your pardon.
Oh, do hurry up and tell us. What have we done?
Done? Oh, it's nothing of that kind, Mrs. Ralston. It's more a matter of police protection, if you understand me.
Police protection.
Relates to the death of Mrs. Lyon, Mrs. Maureen Lyon, of 24 Culver Street, London, who was murdered yesterday, the 15th instant. You may have heard or read about the case.
Oh, yes, I heard it on the wireless. The woman who was strangled?
That's right, madam. Now, the first thing we want to know is if any of you is acquainted with this Mrs. Lyon.
Never heard of her.
You may have known her under the name of Lyon. Lyon wasn't her real name. She had a police record, and her fingerprints were on file, so we were able to identify her without much difficulty. Her real name was Mrs. Stanning. Her husband was a farmer, John Stanning, who resided at the Longridge Farm, not too far from here.
Longridge Farm. Wasn't that where those children...
Yes, the Longridge Farm case.
3 children.
That's quite right, miss. The Corrigans, 2 boys and a girl, brought before the court as in need of care and protection. A home was found for them with Mr. and Mrs. Stanning. One of the children subsequently died as the result of criminal neglect and persistent ill treatment. The case made a bit of a sensation at the time.
It was horrible.
The Stannings were sentenced to terms of imprisonment each. Stanning died in prison. Mr. Stanning served, Mrs. Stanning served her sentence and was duly released. Yesterday, as I say, she was found dead at 24 Culver Street.
Who did it?
I'm coming to that, madam. A notebook was picked up near the scene of the crime. In that notebook was written 2 addresses. One was 24 Culver Street, and the other was Monkswell Manor.
What?
Yes, sir. That's why Superintendent Hogben, on receiving this information from the Scotland Yard, thought it imperative for me to come out and see if you knew of any connection between this house or anyone in this house in the Longridge Farm case.
There's nothing. Absolutely nothing. It must be a coincidence.
Superintendent Hogben does not think it is a coincidence, sir. He'd have come himself if it had been in any way possible. Under the weather conditions, and as I can ski, he sent me with instructions to get full particulars of everyone in the household, report back to him by phone, and take what measures I thought fit to ensure the safety of the household.
Safety? What danger does he think we are in? He's not suggesting that somebody is going to be killed here.
Now, I wouldn't want to frighten any of the ladies, but frankly, yes, that is the idea.
But why?
That's what I'm here to find out.
The whole thing's crazy.
Yes, sir, it's because it's crazy that it's dangerous.
Nonsense.
I must accept it, Farfetch.
I think it's wonderful.
Is there something that you haven't told us yet, Sergeant?
Yes, as a matter of fact, Mrs. Ralston, there is. Below the 2 addresses in the notebook we found were the words, 3 blind mice. And on the dead woman's body was a paper with, "This is the first," written on it. And below the words, drawing of 3 little mice in a bar of music. The music was the tune of the nursery rhyme. You know how it goes. 3 blind mice.
3 blind mice, see how they run. They all ran after the farmer's wife. Oh, it's horrible.
There were 3 children and 1 died.
Yes, the youngest. A boy of 11.
And what happened to the other 2?
The girl was adopted by someone. We haven't been able to trace her present whereabouts. The elder boy would now be about 22. Deserted from the army and has not been heard of since. According to the army psychologist, was definitely schizophrenic. A bit queer in the head, that's to say.
They think it was he who killed Mrs. Lyon, Mrs. Standing,
Yes,
that he's a homicidal maniac, and that he'll turn up here and try to kill someone? But why?
that's what I'm here to find out. As the superintendent sees it, there must be some connection. Now you state, sir, that you yourself have never had any connection with that business at the Longridge Farm?
Nothing. Not at all.
And the same goes for you, madam.
No. I mean, no connection.
What about servants?
We haven't got any servants. That reminds me. Would you mind, Sergeant Trotter, if I went up to the kitchen? I'll be there if you need me.
That's quite all right, Mrs. Ralston. Now, can I have all your names, please?
It's quite ridiculous.
But you'd all plan to come here ahead of time? You'd all booked your rooms here ahead?
Madame Parvicini, my car returned in a snowdrift.
I see. What I'm getting at is that anyone who's been following you around might know very well that you were coming here. Now, there's just one thing I want to know, and I want to know it quick. Which one of you is it that has some connection with that business at the Longridge Farm? You're not being very sensible, you know. One of you is in danger. Deadly danger. I've got to know which one that is. All right? I'll ask you one by one. You first, since you seem to arrive here more or less by accident. Madame Paria...
Parvicini. But, my dear Inspector, I know nothing, but nothing of what you have been talking about. I am but a stranger in this country. I've never heard anything about these foreign affairs of bygone years.
Very well. Mrs. Miss...
Cateswell, Leslie Cateswell. I never heard of the Longridge Farm, and I know nothing about it.
And you, sir?
Metcalf, Major. I read about the case in the papers at the time. I was stationed at Edinburgh then. No personal involvement.
What about you? And that's all you have to say? Any of you? Well, if one of you gets murdered, you'll have yourself to blame. Now, Mr. Ralston, can I have a look around the house?
Yes.
Dears, how melodramatic. How exciting this whole business. He's very rugged, wouldn't you say? Three blind mice. How does the tune go?
Really, Mr. Ram?
You don't like it? But it's a signature tune. The signature of the murderer. Just fancy what a kick he must be getting out of it.
Melodramatic rubbish. I don't believe a word of it.
Oh, but Mrs. Boyle, just you wait until I feel my hands wrap around your throat.
Stop.
That's enough, Christopher. It's a poor joke. In fact, it's not a joke at all.
Oh, but that's exactly what it is. A madman's joke. That's just what makes it so deliciously macabre. You should have seen the looks on your face.
A singularly ill-mannered, neurotic young man.
Where's Giles?
Taking a policeman on a conducted tour of the house.
Your friend, the architect, behaving in a most abnormal manner.
Young fellows seem nervy nowadays. Dare
No.
say I'll grow out of it.
I can't stand it if they have nerves. I haven't got any.
No? Perhaps that's just as well for you, Mrs. Boyle.
What do you mean by that?
I think you were a magistrate on the bench at the time. In fact, you were the magistrate that sent those children to Longridge Farm.
Really? There are cases of welfare workers, and they seemed most anxious to have the children. It seemed like a great healthy outdoors life, good fresh eggs and milk, and overall just a good place with farm.
Kicks, blows, starvation, and a thoroughly vicious couple.
How was I to know they were most civilly spoken?
Yes, I was right. It was you.
One tries to be public, and all one gets is peace.
You must forgive me, but I indeed find this all very amusing. I enjoy myself greatly.
Where did she come from last night?
I don't know.
Looks a bit of a spiv to me. Makes her face up to Rue Gem Tower. Disgusting. She must be quite old too.
And yet she skips about as though she's a much younger woman.
You'll be wanting more wood. I'll get it.
It's almost dark, and yet it's only 4 in the afternoon. I'll turn the lights on. That's better. What a horrid little tune that is.
Don't you like it? Reminds you of your childhood, perhaps? An unhappy childhood?
I was very happy as a child.
You were lucky.
Weren't you happy?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But all that's a long time ago. One gets over things.
I suppose so.
Or doesn't one. Very hard to say.
They say that what happened when you're a child matters more than anything else.
They say. Who says?
Psychologists.
All humbug. Just a whole lot of nonsense. I've no use for psychologists and psychologists.
I've never really had much to do with them.
A good thing for you. You haven't. It's all out of a hooey, the whole thing. Life's what you make of it. Go straight, don't look back.
One can't always help looking back.
Nonsense. Question of willpower.
I suppose so.
I know.
I expect you're right. But sometimes things happen to you to make you remember.
Don't give in. Turn your back on them.
I wonder, is that really the right way?
Depends what you're talking about.
Sometimes I hardly know what I am talking about.
Nothing from the past is going to affect me, except who I want it to.
Well, everything's all right upstairs. Sorry, madam. I've got to get the lay of the land. What's in here? Drawing room?
No, that's the dining room.
Molly, what on earth is this?
I have no idea.
Well, that completes the tour. Nothing suspicious. Think I'll make my report now to Superintendent Pogba.
Oh, but you can't telephone. The line's dead.
What? Since when?
Major Metcalf tried it just after you arrived. We believe it's down with the weight of the snow.
I wonder. It may have been cut.
Cut? But who could have cut it?
Mr. Ralston, just how much do you know about these guests of yours?
We really don't know anything about them.
Ah,
Mrs. Boyle wrote from a hotel in Birmingham, and Major Metcalf from, where was it?
Leamington.
Yes, Leamington. Wren wrote from Hampstead, and the caseful woman from a private hotel in Kingston. Parvicini, as I've told you, turned out of the blue last night. But still, I suppose they've all got ration books, that kind of thing.
we shall go into all that, of course. But there's really not much reliance to be placed on that kind of evidence.
But if you think the murderer is going to turn up here and kill all of us, or one of us, we're quite safe now because of the snow. No one can get here until it melts.
Unless he's here already.
Here, already.
Why not, Mr. Ralston? All your guests arrived here yesterday evening, some hours after the murder of Mrs. Stanton. That's plenty of time to get here.
But except for Parvicini, they've all booked beforehand.
Well, why not? These crimes were planned.
Crimes? There's only been one crime in Culver Street. Why are you so sure that another will happen here?
That it will happen here, no. I hope to prevent that. But it will be attempted.
I can't believe it. The whole thing's crazy.
It's not crazy, Mr. Ralston. It's just a fact.
Sergeant Trotter, do you have a description of what this man looked like in London?
Medium height, indeterminate build, darkish overcoat, soft felt hat, face hidden by a muffler, spoke in a whisper. Mr. Ralston, there are 3 darkish overcoats hanging up in the hall right now. One of them is yours. There are 3 lighted felt hats.
I still don't believe it.
You see, it's this telephone wire that worries me. If it's been cut,
I must go and get on with the dinner.
is there an extension?
My pardon. Did you say something?
Yes, Mr. Ralston. I said, is there an extension?
Yes, up in our bedroom.
Mind going up there and trying it for me?
Yes.
Frightfully cold.
Now, to understand what I may term as the mechanics of fear, you have to study the precise effect produced on the human mind. Imagine, for instance, that you are alone in a room. It is late in the afternoon, and a door opens softly behind you.
can't think. My head's numbed.
Mrs. Boyle had only just been killed when you got to her. You came from the kitchen. Are you sure you didn't see or hear anyone as you came along the hallway?
No, I don't think so. Just the radio blaring out in here. I couldn't think who turned it on so loud.
That was clearly the murderer's idea. Or murderess.
How could I hear anything else?
You might have done if the murderer had left the hall that way. He might have heard you coming from the kitchen. He might have slipped up the back stairs or into the dining room.
I'm not sure. I've heard a door creak and shut just as I came out in here.
Which door?
I don't know.
Think, Mrs. Ralston. Try and think. Upstairs, downstairs, close at hand, right, left.
I don't know, I tell you. I'm not even sure I heard anything.
Stop bullying her. Can't you see that she's all in?
We're investigating a murder, Mr. Ralston. Up to now, nobody has taken this thing seriously. Mrs. Boyle didn't. She held out on me with information. You all held out on me. Well, Mrs. Boyle is dead, and unless we get to the bottom of this, and quickly mind, there's going to be another death.
Another? Nonsense. Why?
Because there were 3 little blind mice.
A death for each of them? But there would have to be some kind of connection. I mean, another connection with that Longridge farm.
Yes, there would have to be that.
But why another death here?
Because there are only 2 addresses written in the notebook we found. At 24 Culver Street, there was only one possible victim. Here at Monkswell Manor, there's let me say, a wider field.
Nonsense. Surely it would be a most unlikely coincidence that 2 people was brought here by chance, and both of them was to share in the Longridge farm case?
Given certain circumstances, it wouldn't be so much of a coincidence. Think it out in this case, Bob. Now I want to get down quite clearly where everyone was when Mrs. Boyle was killed. I've already collected Mrs. Ralston's statement. You were in the kitchen, preparing vegetables. You came out of the kitchen, through the swing door, and in here. The radio was blaring, but the lights were switched off and the hall was dark. You came in, turned on the lights, saw Mrs. Boyle, and screamed.
Yes, I screamed, and at last, people came.
Yes, as you say, people came. A lot of different people from a lot of different directions, all arriving, more or less at once. Now, when I went outside of the window to trace the telephone wire, you, Mr. Ralston, went upstairs to the room you and Mrs. Ralston occupied to try the extension telephone. Where were you when Mrs. Ralston screamed?
I was up in the bedroom. The extension telephone was dead, so I opened the window and looked outside to see any signs of wires being cut. But I couldn't. And just when I was closing the window, I heard Molly scream, and I rushed down.
Those simple actions took you a rather long time to execute, didn't they, Mr. Ralston?
I don't think so.
I should say you definitely took your time over them.
I was thinking about something.
Very well. Mr. Wren, I'll have your account of where you were.
I've been in the kitchen helping Mrs. Ralston prepare the vegetables. After that, I went upstairs to my bedroom.
Why?
It's quite a natural thing to do to go to one's bedroom, isn't it? I mean, one does want to be alone sometime.
You went to your bedroom because you wanted to be alone.
And because I wanted to brush my hair and tidy up.
You wanted to brush your hair.
Anyways, that's where I was.
And you heard Mrs. Ralston scream.
Yes.
And you came down?
Yes.
Curious, isn't it, that you and Mr. Ralston didn't meet on the stairs?
I came down by the back stairs. They're nearer to my room.
Did you go up by the back stairs or did you come through here?
I went up by the back stairs as well.
Very well. Madam Paravicini?
I have told you. I was playing the piano in the drawing room. You there, Inspector?
Did anybody hear you playing the piano?
I do not expect so. I was playing very softly, with one finger, so.
You were playing 3 blind mice.
Is that so?
Yes, it is a very catchy little tune. It is, how shall I say, a haunting little tune. Don't you all agree?
I think it's horrible.
And yet it runs in people's heads. Someone was whistling it, too.
Whistling it? Where?
I'm not sure. Perhaps on the front hall, perhaps on the stairs, perhaps even upstairs in the bedroom.
Who was whistling? 3 blind mice. Are you making this up, Madame Parvatini?
No, no, Inspector. I would not do a thing like that.
Well, go on. You're playing the piano?
It's in the drawing room, yes. And then I hear the radio playing very loud. Someone was shouting on it. It offended my ears. And then, suddenly, I hear Mrs. Ralston scream.
Mr. Ralston upstairs, Mr. Wren upstairs, Madame Parvatini in the drawing room. Miss Casewell,
I was writing letters in the library.
could you hear what was going on in here?
No, I didn't hear anything until Mrs. Ralston screamed.
And what did you do then?
I came in here.
At once?
I think so.
You say you were writing letters when you heard Mrs. Ralston scream.
Yes.
And you came up and from the writing table hurriedly and came in here?
Yes.
And yet, there doesn't seem to be any trace of an unfinished letter on the writing desk in the library.
Well, I brought her with me.
Dearest Jess, friend of yours or a relation?
That's none of your business.
I suppose not. You know, if I were to hear someone screaming blue murder while I was writing letters, I don't believe I'd take the time to pick up my unfinished letter, fold it, and place it carefully in my pocket before coming to see what was the matter.
You wouldn't? How interesting.
Major Metcalf, you say you're in the cellars? Why?
Looking around. Just looking around. I looked into that covered place under the stairs near the kitchen. Lots of junk and sports tackle in there. I opened another door in the cupboard, saw a flight of steps, and went on down. Nice cellars you've got.
Glad you like them.
Not at all. Crypt of an old monastery, I should say. No wonder they call this place Monk's Well.
We're not engaged in an antiquarian research, Major Metcalf. We're investigating a murder. Now, Mrs. Ralston has told us she heard a door shut with a faint creak. That particular door shuts with a creak. It could be, you know, that after killing Mrs. Boyle, the murderer slipped into the cupboard, pulling the door after him.
A lot of things could be.
There would be fingerprints inside the cupboard.
Mine are there, all right, but most criminals are careful to wear gloves, aren't they?
It's usual, but all criminals slip up, sooner or later.
I wonder, Sergeant, if that's really true.
But look here, Sergeant. Aren't you wasting time? There's one
Please,
person...
Mr. Ralston, I am in charge of this investigation.
Very well, but...
Mr. Ralston? Mr. Ralston! Thank you. We've got to establish opportunity, you know, as well as motive. And let me tell you this. You all had opportunity.
Now, why couldn't it? It's impossible.
There are 2 staircases. Anyone could go up by one and come down by the other. Anyone could go down to the cellars by a door near the kitchen and come up through a flight of steps that leads through a trap door over there. The vital fact is that every one of you was alone at the time the murder was committed.
The Sergeant, you speak as though we were all under suspicion. That's absurd.
In a murder case, everyone is under suspicion.
But you know pretty well who killed a woman in Culver Street. You think it's the eldest of those 3 children, a mentally abnormal young man who's now 23 years away. Well, dread it all. There's one person here who fits the bill.
It's not true. It's not true. You're gonna frame me for these murders. It's persecution. It's persecution.
Steady, lad. Steady.
It's all right, Chris. Nobody's against you. Tell him it's all right.
We don't frame people.
Tell him you're not going to arrest him.
I'm not arresting anyone. To do that, I've got to have evidence. I haven't got any evidence. Yet.
I think you're crazy, Molly. And you too. There's one person who fits the bill, and only for a safety measure, he ought to be put under arrest.
Wait, Giles, wait. Sergeant Trotter, can I speak to you a minute?
Certainly, Mrs. Ralston. The rest of you go into the dining room, please.
I'm staying.
No, you too, please, Giles.
I'm staying. I don't know what's come over you.
Please, Giles.
Yes, Mrs. Ralston? What was it you wanted to say to me?
Sergeant Trotter, you think that this crazy killer must be the elder of the two boys of 3 children at the Long-Range Farm. But you don't really know that, do you?
We don't actually know a thing. All we've got so far is that the woman who joined her husband in ill-treating and persecuting those children has been killed, and that the magistrate responsible for sending those children to the farm where they were starved has been killed. The telephone wire that linked me with police headquarters has been cut.
But you don't even know that. It might have just been the snow.
No, Mrs. Ralston. It was deliberately cut. I saw the place just outside the front door.
Oh, I see.
Take a seat, Mrs. Ralston.
But all the same, you don't know.
I'm going by probability. It all points one way. Childish mentality, mental instability, desertion from the army. The psychiatrist reports.
Oh, I know, and therefore all seems to point to Christopher. But I don't believe that it is Christopher. There must be other possibilities.
Such as?
Well, haven't those children any relations at all?
Their mother was a drunk. She died soon after the children were taken away from her.
What about the father?
He was an army sergeant serving abroad. If he's alive, he's probably been discharged from the army by now.
But you don't know where he is now?
To trace him may take some time, but I can assure you, Mrs. Ralston, that the police take every eventuality into account.
Well, if you don't know where he is now, and if his son was mentally unstable, well, the father might have been unstable as well.
It's a possibility.
If he came home, after being a prisoner with the Japanese, perhaps, and having suffered terribly, if he came home and he found his wife dead, and that his 3 children had gone through some horrible experience, and one of them had died through it, well, he might go off his head a bit and want revenge.
That's only some rise.
But it's possible?
Oh yes, Mrs. Ralston. It's quite possible.
So the murderer may be middle-aged or even old. You know, Major Metcalf was frightfully upset when I said the police had run up. He really was. I saw his face.
Major Metcalf?
Middle-aged, a soldier. He seems quite nice, but it mightn't show, might it?
No, often it doesn't show at all.
So it's not only Christopher Wren who's a suspect. There's Major Metcalf as well.
Any other suggestions?
Well, Madame Paravicini did drop the poker when I said the police had rung up.
Madame Paravicini.
I know she seems quite old and foreign and everything, but she might not really be as old as she looks. She moves about as though she's a much younger woman, and she has a lot of makeup on her face. Miss Casewell noticed it too. I know it seems very melodramatic, but she might be disguised.
You're very anxious, aren't you? That it shouldn't be this young Mr. Wren?
He seems so helpless somehow, and so unhappy.
Let me tell you something, Mrs. Ralston. We, the police, have had all the possibilities in mind from the very beginning. The boy, Georgie, the father, and someone else. There was a sister, you remember?
Oh, the sister.
Yes, the man's felt hat pulled down, and the muffler pulled up, and the killer whispered, you know. The voice that gives the sex away. Very well, could have been a woman who killed Mrs. Maureen Lyons.
Miss Casewell?
She seems a bit old for the part. Oh yes, Mrs. Ralston, there's a very wide field. There's yourself, for instance.
Me?
You're about the right age.
Well, I couldn't tell.
No, nothing you say. We have no means of checking on at this moment. There's your husband as well.
Giles, how ridiculous.
He and Christopher Wren are much of an age. Say, Christopher Wren looks younger than his years and your husband looks older. Actual age is very hard to tell. How much do you know about your husband, Mrs. Ralston?
How much do I know about Giles? Don't be ridiculous.
You've been married how long?
A year,
And you met him where?
at a party in London.
Did you meet his people?
He hasn't any people. They're all dead.
They're all dead.
Yes, but, oh, you make it sound all wrong. His father was a barrister and his mother died when he was a baby.
You're only telling me what he told you.
Yes, but
You don't know it of your own knowledge.
it's outrageous that...
You'd be surprised, Mrs. Ralston, how many cases rather like yours we get, especially after the war. Homes broken up and families dead. Fellow says he's been in the Air Force or just finished his army training. Parents killed. No relations. There aren't any background checks nowadays, and young people settle their own affairs. They meet and marry. The parents and relatives who used to make background checks before they consented to an engagement, but that's all done away with. Girl just marries her man. Sometimes she doesn't find out for a year or two that he's an absconding bank clerk, or an army deserter, or something much, much worse. How long had you known your husband when you married him?
Just 3 weeks, but...
And you don't know anything about him?
That's not true. I know everything about him. I know exactly the sort of person he is. He's Giles. It's absolutely absurd for you to suggest that he's a crazy homicidal maniac. Why, he wasn't even in London yesterday when the murder took place.
Where was he? Here?
No, he had to go across the country to get some wire netting for our chickens.
Bring it back with him?
No, it turned out to be the wrong kind.
Only 30 miles from London, I see. You have a train schedule, I see? Only an hour by train. A little longer by car.
I tell you, Giles wasn't in London.
Hang on a minute, Mrs. Ralston. Is this your husband's coach?
Yes.
Evening news. Yesterday's. Sold on the streets of London at 3:30 in the afternoon.
I don't believe it.
Don't you? Don't you?
Mrs. Ralston,
Oh, you startled me.
where is he? Where is he gone?
Who?
The sergeant.
Oh, he went out that way.
My dear, is there anywhere I could hide in this house?
Hide?
Yes, from him.
But why?
My dear, they're all so frightfully against me. They're going to say I committed these murders, particularly your husband.
Never mind him. Listen, Chris, you can't go on running away from things all your life.
Why do you say that?
Well, it's true, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, I suppose it is.
Got to grow up sometime, Chris.
I wish I hadn't.
Your name isn't really Christopher Wren, is it?
No,
And you're not really training to become an architect?
no.
Then why did you...
Call myself Christopher Wren? It just amused me. They always used to call me in school Little Christopher Robin. Robin, Wren, association of ideas. It was terrible being at school.
What's your real name?
We needn't go into that. I ran away whilst I was in the army service. It was all so beastly. Yes, I know. I'm just like the unknown murderer. I told you I was the one the specification fitted. You see, in this way, if my mother,
Yes, your mother?
if she hadn't died, she'd still be here. Look after me.
Christopher, you can't go on being looked after all your life. Things happen to you, and you've got to bear it. You've got to go on just as usual.
One can't do that.
Yes, one can.
You mean, you have?
Yes.
Was it something very bad?
Something I've never forgotten.
Was it to do with Giles?
Oh no, it was long before I met Giles.
You must have been very young. Almost a child.
Perhaps that's why I was so awful. I try to put it out of my head. I try never to think about it.
So, you're running away from things too? Running away from them instead of facing them?
I suppose, in a way, I am. Considering that we never met each other until yesterday, we seem to know each other rather well, don't we?
Yes, it's odd, isn't it?
I don't know. I suppose there's a sort of sympathy between us.
Anyways, you think I ought to stick it out?
Well, frankly, what else can you do?
I might pinch the sergeant's skis. I can ski quite well.
That'd be frightfully stupid. It'd be almost like admitting you're guilty.
Well, Sergeant Trotter thinks I'm guilty.
No, he doesn't. At least, I don't know what he thinks. I hate him, I hate him, I hate him.
Who?
Sergeant Trotter. He puts things into your head that aren't true, that can't possibly be true.
What is all this?
I don't believe it. I won't believe it.
What don't you believe? Come on, out with it.
See that?
Yes?
What is it? An evening paper. A London paper. And it was in Giles's overcoat pocket. But Giles wasn't in London yesterday.
Well, if he was here all day,
But he wasn't. He was driving around the countryside to get some wire netting for our chickens.
I suppose he did go to London then.
Then why shouldn't he tell me that he did? Why pretend he'd been racing all around the countryside?
Perhaps with news of this murder.
But he didn't know about the murder. Or did he? Did he?
Goodness, Molly, Surely you don't think that the sergeant doesn't think that...
I don't know what the sergeant thinks. He makes you think things about people. You ask yourself questions and you begin to doubt. You feel as though somebody you love and know well might be a stranger. That's what happens in a nightmare. You're somewhere in the middle of friends, and then suddenly you look at their faces, and they're not your friends any longer. They're strangers. Perhaps you can't trust anybody. Perhaps everybody's a stranger. No, we were just talking. I really must go to the kitchen and get on with dinner.
I'll come give you a hand.
No, you won't.
Giles!
Tete-a-tetes aren't very healthy things at present. You keep away from the kitchen and keep away from my wife.
But really, look here.
You keep away from my wife. She's not going to be the next victim.
So that's what you think of me.
Haven't I already said so? There's a killer loose in this house, and it seems to me you fit the bill.
I'm not the only one who fits the bill.
I don't see who else does.
How blind you are. Or do you just pretend to be blind?
I'm telling you, I'm worried about my wife's safety.
So am I. And that's why I'm not going to leave you here with her.
What on earth is this?
Please go, Chris.
I won't go.
Please go, Christopher. I mean it.
I shan't be far away.
Molly, you must be going crazy. Perfectly prepared to shut yourself up in the kitchen with a homicidal maniac.
He isn't.
You've only got to look at him to see that he's a barmaid.
He isn't. I tell you, Giles, he isn't dangerous. He's just unhappy. I'd know if he was dangerous. And anyways, I can look after myself.
That's what Mrs. Boyle said.
Oh, Giles, don't.
Look here, what's there between you and that wretched boy?
What do you mean by between us? I'm sorry for him, that's all.
Perhaps you've met him before. Perhaps you suggested him to come over here and that you'd both pretend to meet for the first time. All cooked up between you, isn't it?
Giles, have you gone out of your mind? How dare you suggest that?
Rather odd, isn't it, for him to come over to an out-of-a-place like this?
No odder than that Miss Casewell and Major Metcalf or Mrs. Boyle should.
I once read in a newspaper that his homicidal cases were able to attract women. It seems to me that it was quite true. When did you first meet him, and how long has it been going on?
Giles, you're being absolutely ridiculous. I never saw Isaac Christopher Men until he arrived yesterday.
That's what you say. Perhaps you've been going up to London to meet him on the sly.
What do you mean? You know perfectly well that I haven't been up to London for weeks.
I haven't been going up to London for weeks. Is that so?
It's quite true.
Then what is this? This is the glove that you were wearing yesterday. I picked it up this afternoon while talking to Sergeant Trotter. Look what's inside it. It's a London bus ticket.
Oh, that.
So it seems to me you've been going up to London.
Oh, right, I went to...
Whilst I was safely racing around the countryside.
Whilst you were racing around the countryside.
Come on, admit it. You went up to London yesterday.
All right, I went to London. So did you.
No.
So did you. You brought back an evening paper.
Where did you get hold of that?
It was in your overcoat pocket.
Anybody could have put it in there.
Did they? No, you were in London.
All right, I went up to London. But I didn't go there to meet a woman.
Didn't you? Are you sure you didn't?
What do you mean?
Go away. Don't come near me.
What's the matter?
Don't touch me.
Did you go up to London yesterday to meet that wretched boy?
What do you mean? Of course I didn't.
Then why on earth did you go?
I shan't tell you that. Perhaps by now I've forgotten why I went.
Holly, you must be going crazy. You're different all of a sudden. I feel as though I don't know you anymore.
Perhaps you never did know me. We've been married how long? A year? But you don't really know anything about me. What I'd done, or thought, or felt, or suffered before you knew me.
Molly, you're crazy.
All right, then I'm crazy. Why not? Perhaps it's fun to be crazy.
What on earth are you?
No. I do hope you young people are not both saying a little more than you mean. One is so apt to lose lovers' quarrel.
Lovers quarrel?
Quite so, quite so. I know just how you feel. I've been through all this myself when I was a younger woman. Je ne sais, as the poet says. Not been married long, I imagine.
It's none of your business, Madame Parravicini.
No business at all. I just came in to say that the sergeant cannot find his key. And I'm afraid he's very annoyed.
Christopher.
What?
He wants to know if you've by any chance moved them, Mr. Ralston.
Certainly not.
Mr. Ralston, Mrs. Ralston, have either of you two removed a pair of skis from the cupboard where we put them?
No, not at all.
Somebody's taken them.
What made you happen to look for them?
The snow is still lying. I need help here. Reinforcements. I was going to ski over to the police station at Market Hampton to report on the situation.
But now you can't. Dear, dear. Someone's certainly seen to it that you shan't do that. But there could be another reason, couldn't there?
Yes? What?
Someone may want to get away.
What did you just mean when you just said Christopher right now?
Nothing.
So our young architect has hooked it, has he? Very interesting.
Is this true, Mrs. Ralston?
Oh, thank goodness. There you are. You haven't gone after all.
Did you take my skis, Mr. Wren?
Your skis, Sergeant? No, why should I?
Mrs. Ralston seemed to think.
Mr. Wren is very fond of skiing. I thought I might have taken them to get a little exercise.
Exercise.
Now listen, you people. This is a very serious matter. Someone has removed my only means of communication with the outside world. I want everyone assembled in here, at once.
I think Miss Casewell has gone upstairs.
I'll get her.
I left Major Metcalf in the dining room. Major Metcalf! He's not there now.
I'll go look for him.
Hello? Wanting me?
It's a question of my skis.
Skis?
Mr. Ralston!
Have either of you two removed a pair of skis from the cupboard by the kitchen door?
Good Lord, no. Why should I?
And I haven't touched them.
Nevertheless, they are gone. Which way did you go up to your room?
By the back stairs.
Then you passed by the cupboard where those skis were stored.
If you say so. I have no idea where your skis are.
And you were actually in that cupboard today.
Yes.
At the time Mrs. Boyle was killed?
At the time Mrs. Boyle was killed, I was already down in the cellar.
Did you see my skis in there when you passed through?
I have the least idea.
Are you sure you didn't see them in there?
Can't remember.
You must remember. If my skis were in there then.
No good shouting at me, young fellow. I wasn't thinking about any darn skis. I was interested in the cellars. Architecture of this place is quite interesting. I saw another door, went down a flight of steps, so I can't tell you whether I saw your skis or not.
You realize that you yourself had a very good opportunity of taking them?
Yes, I grant you that. If I wanted to, that is.
Question is, where are they now?
Ought to be able to find them if we all set to it. Not a case of hunt the thimble, whacking great things skis. Supposing we all set to it.
Hang on a minute, Major Metcalf. That maybe you know what we are meant to do.
I don't get you.
I'm in the place now where I've got to put myself in the place of a crazy, cunning brain. I have to ask myself what he wants us to do, and what he himself is planning to do next. I've got to keep just one step ahead of him, because if I don't, there's going to be another death.
You still don't believe that?
Yes, Miss Casewell, I do. 3 blind mice. 2 mice canceled out. A third still to be dealt with. There are 6 of you listening to me right now. 1 of you is a killer. 1 of you is a killer. I don't know which yet, but I shall. And another of you is the killer's prospective victim. That's the person I'm speaking to now. Mrs. Boyle held out on me with information. Well, Mrs. Boyle is dead. You, whoever you are, holding out on me, well, don't, because you're in danger. Nobody who's killed twice is going to hesitate to kill a 3rd time. And as it is, I don't know which of you it is that needs protection. All right then, you won't. Come on, anyone who has anything, however slight, to reproach themselves for, and that bygone business had better come out with it. You still won't? All right then. I'll get the killer. I've no doubt of that. But it may be too late for one of you. And I'll tell you another thing, too. The killer's enjoying this. Oh, yes. They're enjoying themselves a good deal. All right. You're dismissed.
Talking of chicken, dear lady, have you ever tried chicken's livers served on toast that has been thickly smeared with foie gras with a very thin rasher of bacon just touched with a soufflon of fresh mustard? Come with me to the kitchen and we will see what we can make together.
I'm helping my wife, Carvacini.
Your husband is afraid for you. Quite natural under the circumstances. He doesn't fancy you being alone with me. It is my sadistic tendencies he fears, not my culinary ones.
I'm sure Giles doesn't think...
He is very wise. Take no chances. But can I prove to you, or to him, or to our Dodge sergeant, that I'm not a homicidal maniac? So difficult to prove a negative. And instead suppose that I am really...
Oh, don't.
With such a gay little tune, she cut off their tails with a carving knife. Snick, snick, snick. Just what a child would adore. Cruel little things, children. Some of them never grow up.
Stop scaring my wife at once, Carvacini.
It's silly of me, I know, but you see, I found her. Her face was all purple. I can't forget it.
Yes. You aren't really the forgetting kind.
I must go to the kitchen and get on with dinner. Please, Giles.
What did you say to the lady to upset her, madam?
Oh, me, Sergeant. Just a little innocent fun. I've always been fond of a little joke.
There's nice fun, and there's fun that's not so nice.
Now, wonder what you mean by that, Sergeant.
Yes, I've been doing a little wondering about you, too.
Indeed.
About this car of yours, and how it happened to overturn in a snowdrift. So convenient.
Inconveniently, don't you mean, Sergeant?
That rather depends on the way you're looking at it. Now, where were you bound for, by the way, when you had your accident?
I was on my way to see a friend.
In this neighborhood?
Not so very far from here.
And what was the name and address of this friend?
Now, really, Sergeant, does that matter now? I mean, it has nothing to do with this current predicament, has it?
We always like the fullest information. Now, what did you say this friend's name was?
I didn't say.
No, you didn't say. And I'm beginning to think you're not going to say. No, that's very interesting.
A young lady is entitled to her own secrets, is she not?
A young lady, you say?
My dear Sergeant, I am not perhaps quite so old as I look.
Yes, that's what I've been beginning to think.
What?
That you may not be so old as you try to look. There are a lot of people running around trying to look younger than they are. But if someone goes about trying to look older, well, it does make oneself ask why.
Having asked questions of so many people, you ask them of yourself as well. Isn't that overdoing things?
I might get an answer for myself, but I don't get many from you.
Well, well. Try again. That is, if you have any more questions to ask.
One or two. Where were you coming from? Last night?
That is simple. I was coming from London.
What address in London?
I always stay at the Ritz Hotel.
Very nice, too, I'm sure. Permanent address?
I dislike permanency.
I see. Business or profession?
I play the market.
Stockbroker?
No, you misunderstood.
Enjoying this little game, aren't you? Sure of yourself, too. But I shouldn't be too sure. You're mixed up in a murder case. And don't you forget it. Murder isn't just fun and games.
Not even this murder. Dear me, Sergeant, you're very serious. I've always thought policemen have no sense of humor. Is the Inquisition over, for the moment?
For the moment, yes.
Thank you. I shall go and look for your skis in the drawing room, just in case someone's hidden them in the grand piano.
Just a minute.
Were you speaking to me?
Yes. Have a seat.
Well,
What do you want?
You heard the questions I was asking Madame Parvatini earlier.
I heard them.
I'd like to get a little information from you as well.
What do you want to know?
Full name, please.
Leslie Margaret Catherine Casewell.
Catherine.
I spell with a K.
Quite so. Address?
Villa Mariposa, Bandior, Mallorca.
That's in Italy?
It's an island. A Spanish island.
I see. And your address in England?
Care of Morgan Spain, Denhall Street.
No other English address?
No,
How long have you been in England?
about a week.
And you've been staying since your arrival?
At the Ledbury Hotel, Knightsbridge.
What brought you to Monkswell Manor, Miss Casewell?
I wanted somewhere quiet in the country.
And how long did you, or do you, propose to remain here?
Until I have finished what I came here to do.
And what was that? And what was that?
Eh?
What was it you came here to do?
I beg your pardon. I was thinking of something else.
You haven't answered my question, Miss Casewell.
I really don't see why I should. It's a matter that concerns me. A very strictly private affair.
All the same, Miss Casewell.
No, I don't think we'll argue about it.
You mind telling me your age?
Not in the least. It's on my passport. I'm 24.
24.
You thought I looked older. That's quite true.
Is there anyone in this country who can vouch for you?
My bank will refer you to as my financial position. I can also refer you to a solicitor, a very discreet man. I'm not in a position to offer you any social reference. I've lived most of my life abroad,
In Mallorca?
in Mallorca and in other places.
Were you born abroad?
No, I left England when I was 13.
You know, Miss Casewell, I can't quite make you out.
Does it matter?
I don't know. What are you doing here?
It seems to worry you.
It does worry me. You say you went abroad when you were 13.
So, 13, thereabouts.
Was your name Casewell then?
It's my name now.
What was your name then? Come on, tell me.
What are you trying to prove?
I want to know what your name was when you left England.
It's a long time ago. I've forgotten.
There are things one doesn't forget.
Possibly.
Unhappiness? Despair?
I dare say.
What is your real name?
I told you, Leslie Margaret. Catherine Casewell.
Catherine, what on earth are you doing here?
I wish God had never come here.
I always thought the police weren't allowed to give people the third degree.
I've merely been interrogating Miss Casewell.
He seems to have upset her. What did he do?
No, it's just all this murder. It's so horrible. It came over me suddenly. I shall go back to my room.
It's impossible. I can't believe it.
What can't you believe? 6 impossible things before breakfast, like the Red Queen.
Oh yes, it's rather like that.
Dear, you look as though you'd seen a ghost.
I've seen something I ought to have seen before. Blind as a bat I've been. But now we may be able to get somewhere.
The police have a clue.
Yes, Mr. Pratt, the police have a clue. I want everyone assembled in here again. You know where they are?
Major Metcalf and I have been looking for your skis in the most entertaining of places. Molly and Mr. Ralston are in the kitchen. I don't know where Parvacini is.
I'll get her. You get the others. Madam Parvacini. Madam Parvacini. Parvacini.
Yes, Sergeant. What can I do for you? Aw, little Bo policeman has lost his skis and doesn't know where to find them. Leave them alone and they'll come home, dragging a murder behind them.
What is all this?
Sit down, Major Metcalf. Mrs. Ralston.
Inconvenient.
There are more important things than meals, Mrs. Ralston. Mrs. Boyle, for instance, won't be needing another meal.
That's a very tactless way of putting things, Sergeant.
I'm sorry, but I want your cooperation, and I intend to get it. Now, Mr. Ralston, will you go upstairs and ask Miss Casewell to move down again? She went up to her bedroom. Tell her it will only be for a few minutes. No, Mrs. Ralston, but I must say, I have a very shrewd idea of who took them, and why they were taken. I won't say more at the present moment.
Please don't. I always think explanations should be kept to the very end. That exciting last chapter, you know?
This isn't a game, Madam Parvicini.
Wrong. I think that this is a game to somebody else.
You think the murderers enjoying themselves? Maybe. Maybe.
Sit down. Sit down. Casewell. Mr. Ralston. Mrs. Ralston. Now, you may remember, after the death of Mrs. Boyle, I took statements from you all. These statements related to your positions at the time the murder was committed. These statements were as follows. Mrs. Ralston in the kitchen. Madame Parvicini playing the piano in the drawing room. Mr. Ralston upstairs. Mr. Wren upstairs. Miss Casewell in the library. And Major Metcalf in the cellars. Correct. These were the statements you made. I have no means of checking up on these statements. They may be true, they may not. To put it quite clearly, 5 of these statements are true, but 1 is not. Which one? I have a plan that may help me discover the liar. And once I know that one of you lied to me, then I know who the murderer is.
Not necessary. But for some other reason.
I rather doubt that.
I don't get the idea. Haven't you just said that you had no reason of checking the statement?
Yes, supposing everyone should go through their actions a second time.
Ah, that old chestnut. Reconstruction of the crime.
Not a reconstruction of the crime, Madame Parvicini. A reconstruction of the movements of apparently innocent persons.
And what do you expect to learn from all this, Sergeant?
You may forgive me if I don't make that quite clear at the moment. Yes, Mr. Ralston, I do. What do you mean? I simply want people to do as they have done before.
I also don't see. I simply can't see. What do you possibly hope to gain by just making people do the same things they did before?
You can't see, Mr. Wren? No, I can't count anyone out. One might almost believe you are all guilty by the looks of you. Why are you all so unwilling?
Of course. What you say, Mr. Surgeon? Who all cooperate? Molly, Red, Carabicini,
Oh, yes, I consent.
Miss Casewell,
Yes.
Major Metcalf.
Yes.
Are we all to do what we exactly did before?
The same actions will be performed, yes.
Then I will return to the piano in the drawing room. Once again, I will pick out with one finger the signature tune of the murderer. Dun, 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 dun.
Not quite so fast, Madame Parvicini. Do you play the piano, Mrs. Ralston? And do you know the tune of Three Blind Mice? Then you could play the piano in the drawing room just as Madame Parvicini did. Why don't you go and do so for the present?
But, Sergeant, I understood we were each to repeat our former roles.
The same actions will be performed, but not necessarily by the same people. Now you will all listen as I assign your new positions. Thank you, Mrs. Ralston.
But I don't get the point.
I assure you, Mr. Ralston, there is a point. It is a means of checking up on the original statements, and maybe one statement in particular. Now, you'll all listen as I assign you your new roles. Mr. Wren, will you go into the kitchen and look after Mrs. Ralston's dinner for her? I believe you are very fond of cooking. Madame Parvicini, will you go up to Mr. Wren's room? Major Metcalf, will you go up to Mr. Ralston's room? and examine the telephone there. Well, will you go down to the cellars? Mr. Wren will show you the way. Unfortunately, I need someone to reproduce my own actions as well. I'm sorry to ask you, but could you go outside of the window and trace the telephone wire around near the front door? Rather a chilly job, but you're probably the toughest person.
And what are you going to be doing, Sergeant?
I will be playing the part of Mrs. Boyle.
Taking a bit of a risk, aren't you?
You will all go to your stations and remain there until you hear me call you.
Parlor games.
No objection to my very post. I should advise it, sir. Take my lamp as well. It should be down by where the shoes are stored. Mrs. Ralston, count to 20 and then begin to play. Mrs. Ralston? Mrs. Ralston? Mrs. Ralston? Mrs. Ralston?
Yes? What is it? You're looking quite pleased with yourself. Have you got what you wanted?
Yes, Mrs. Ralston. I've got exactly what I wanted.
You know who the murderer is?
You ought to know, Mrs. Ralston.
I?
Come now, Mrs. Ralston. We police aren't quite so dumb as you think. I've known all along that you had first-hand knowledge of the Longridge Farm affair.
I don't know what you mean.
You knew Mrs. Boyle was the magistrate concerned. In fact, you knew all about it. By not saying so, you put your life in danger more than once. Why didn't you speak up and say so?
I don't understand. I wanted to forget. Forget.
Your maiden name was Waring?
Yes.
Miss Waring.
You taught school.
In the school where those children went.
Yes.
It's true, isn't it? That Jimmy, the child who died, managed to get a letter posted to you. That letter begged for help. Help from his kind young teacher. You never answered that letter.
I couldn't. I never got it.
You just didn't bother.
That's not true. I was ill. I went down with pneumonia that very day. It was the letter was put aside with a lot of other letters. It was weeks afterwards that I finally read it. And by then, it was too late. That poor child was dead, waiting for me to do something, hoping, gradually losing hope. Oh, it's haunted me ever since. If only I hadn't been ill. It's monstrous that such things should happen.
Yes. It's monstrous.
I thought policemen didn't carry revolvers.
Police don't. I'm not a police. You thought I was a policeman because I rang up from a call box and told you Sergeant Trotter was on his way. I cut the telephone wire before I came into the house. You know who I am, Mrs. Ralston? I'm George. Jimmy's brother, Georgie.
Oh.
Jimmy died. That nasty, cruel woman killed him. I said I'd kill her one day, and I did too in the park. It was great fun. I'll kill them all when I've grown up, because grown-ups can do anything they like. I'm going to kill you in a minute.
Better not. I'll never get away safely, you know.
Someone's hidden my skis. I can't find them, but doesn't matter. I don't really mind whether I get away or not. It's all been such fun, watching you all and pretending to be a policeman.
That revolver will make a lot of noise.
It will, rather. Much better to do it the usual way. And take you by the neck.
Georgie! Georgie! Don't you remember me, Georgie? Don't you remember the farm, Georgie? The animals, and the cattle pig, and the gentleman who chased us across the field, and the dogs.
Dog?
Yes, bottom plane.
Kathy?
Kathy, you remember me now, don't you? Georgie,
What are you doing here?
I came to England to find you, but I didn't recognize you until you twirled your hair like you always used to do. Yes, you always did, Georgie. Georgie, you're coming with me.
Where are we going?
I'm taking you a place where they will look after you and see you will do no more harm. Let's go.
Molly, are you alright? Oh, darling. But are you alright? Whoever would have dreamed it that it was Trotter?
He's mad, quite mad.
Yes, but you.
I was mixed up in it all. I taught the school where those children went. He thought it wasn't my fault, but he thought I could have saved that child.
You should have told me.
I wanted to forget.
Everything's under control. He'll be unconscious soon, under a sedative. His sister's
Looking after him. Poor fellow's mad as a hatter. Of course, I've always had my suspicions of him.
You didn't believe he was a policeman?
I knew he wasn't a policeman, Mrs. Ralston. You see, I'm a policeman.
You?
As soon as we got hold of that notebook with Monkswell Manor written in it, we saw it as vital to have someone on the spot immediately. When it was put to him, Major Metcalf agreed to let me take his place. Well,
Well, it's his sister.
yes, Casewell is his sister. He recognized him just before this last business. Didn't know what to do. Came to me about it, luckily, just in time. It started to thaw. The help will be on its way pretty soon. Oh, and Mrs. Ralston, I'll remove those keys for you. I hid them on top of the four-poster.
I thought it was Pervicini.
I gather they'll search that car rather carefully. I wouldn't be surprised if they found 1,000 Swiss watches or so. Yes, that's his line of business. Nasty little bits of goods. Molly, I believe you thought I was.
Giles, what were you doing in London yesterday?
I was buying you an anniversary present. We've been married just a year today.
Oh, that's what I went to London for, and I didn't want you to know.
No.
It's a watch. I do hope it's all right.
Darling, how sweet of you.
You'll
It's splendid.
You'll use it?
Of course.
What's my present?
Oh yes, I forgot all about them. It's a scarf.
A scarf? But I practically never wear one.
Just for the best, you know. Will you wear them?
Oh, whenever I need to go outside again.
The girl on the store said that it was the last thing on the scarves. Splendid, isn't it?
Oh, it's lovely, darling.
Oh, you look great on it.
Ralston! Mrs. Ralston! There's a terrible smell of burning coming from the kitchen!
Oh, my pie!